So good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us on this webinar today, where we'll be presenting our proposal for the Burtree Lane Solar Farm. Sorry we're not able to meet up in person due to the current situation, but we hope this will still get you a good idea of our proposals and allow us to answer all of your questions. So I'm Chloe, I'm the Community Liaison Manager here at Aura Power, and I'm joined by my colleague Steph, who is the project developer for this site, and Claire, our planning consultant from Ingenia. Before we go into the proposal itself, I just want to explain to you exactly how this webinar will work. So we'll take about 30 minutes presenting the plans, and then we'll open up the virtual floor for any questions that you might have for us to answer. Your microphones will be muted for all of the session, but you should see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen where you can type your question for us to then answer out loud. We'll only be answering questions once we have presented our plans, so please feel free to type your questions at any time during this session. However, I would advise waiting till the end in case your question is covered in our presentation. So this webinar is being recorded and will be available to watch again on our website. If you are watching the recorded version and have a question that has not been addressed, please do contact us. We'll also make the presentation slides available to download. We would also like to ask you to complete a short feedback form after the webinar, which I will send around following this session. That'd be great. So hopefully you can all see my screen. I'm just going to move to the first slide. So who is Aura Power? So we are a renewable energy developer based in Bristol and founded in 2013. We now have around 30 staff in total and a dedicated UK team. We have numerous utility scale solar farms and battery storage sites in development, not only in the UK, but also in the Republic of Ireland, Portugal, Italy, Spain, Canada, and the US. So we're a partner of IB an engineering firm that's built over a gigawatt of solar farms worldwide and developed projects on a global scale. That equates to over 3 million solar panels with over 80 solar farms of varying sizes, of which more than half of those are situated in the UK. So with the experience and financial backing of a global company like IB we have the capability and financial security to see a project all the way through its development process to construction and then on to operation. As a responsible developer, our remit is to develop the solar farm design whilst engaging with the local community and subsequently obtain planning permission. IB will then construct and then operate the solar farm once it's built. So why solar? So as we all know, we are in a climate and ecological emergency, and it's important to recognise why solar can play such an important role in the future of our energy sector and our environment. A recent report by the International Energy Association laid out the roadmap to achieving net zero emissions globally by 2050. It stated that to meet this challenge, the world would need to install 4 times the amount of wind and solar than it did in 2020. This equates to adding a solar park every day over the next 9 years. In 2019, the UK government became the first in the world to set a legally binding target for net zero emissions by 2050. And the Climate Change Committee's most recent landmark report states a target of 85 gigawatt solar by 2050. That equates to a total of 1,700 solar farms of the same size as this one in the UK alone. That's 8.5 times more solar power than we were generating in 2019. So we've already seen a substantial increase in wind and solar generation, with renewables outpacing fossil fuel generation for the first time last year. Renewables now account for about 40% of total electricity generation in the UK. Solar energy is already proven to be the cheapest form of new electricity generation, according to the International Energy Agency, and the government's recent energy white paper demonstrates the important role it will play to complement wind in the country's future transition to net zero. Furthermore, as it's no longer supported by subsidies, this helps to reduce energy prices for everyone. Darlington Borough Council has set a commendable target to become carbon neutral by 2050, and solar funds like this should help the council realise this goal. As well as generating clean, renewable energy, solar farms will enrich local biodiversity, continue the use of agriculture via sheep grazing, and provide a store for carbon. This solar farm will have a capacity of up to 49.9 megawatts, which we estimate will generate enough electricity to power the equivalent of over 16,000 typical Darlington Borough Council homes and save over 13,000 tons of CO2 from entering the atmosphere each year. The power generated from this solar farm could also power nearly over 19,000 electric cars each year, just as another comparison figure. So the location of this site. So as you can see from the map here, our proposed location is around 4 kilometres north of the centre of Darlington. Our entire application boundary covers approximately 60 hectares of land with less than 5% impact to the ground from on-site infrastructure. It predominantly lies in the parish of Wesso, with the northern part in the parish of Coatham-Munderville. So it's just to the north of Burtree Lane and to the east of the A1M. I think we do have, or maybe we don't, I can't see, we did have a representative from Wesso Parish Council registered to attend this event, but we understand that Coatham-Munderville doesn't have a parish council, so if if anybody watching knows any representatives from this parish, then please do inform them to get in touch with myself. So the land is owned by one landowner who's currently looking to diversify their land use, as farming in the UK is becoming increasingly challenging through more unpredictable weather and market conditions. The land is currently being used for cattle and sheep grazing, but sheep grazing will continue during the lifetime of the solar farm. The fields will be left fallow as opposed to any arable farming that may have taken place across the duration. Therefore, the soil will benefit from being rested, and with the inclusion of wildflowers, improve local biodiversity. So finding a site for a solar farm can be very difficult as there are many constraints that need to be sensibly considered and balanced. Finding sufficient capacity on the electricity grid is one of the most difficult challenges, and we have been fortunate enough to secure a grid connection with the Northern Power Grid, connecting directly into the substation at Darlington North, approximately 1.4 kilometres from the south of the site. The land is also not subject to any land or environmental designations, and the footpath, which we'll talk about later, that runs to the east of the site, will be retained. So just moving on to other reasons why we feel this site is suitable for a solar farm. So as well as the grid connection and suitability of the land that I've just mentioned, we also believe it's suitable for a number of other reasons. So historically, much of the land has been used for industrial purposes, including a former landfill site and quarry, making it suitable for development such as this. Soil quality typically should be of 3B or below for a site, for a solar farm, and our land classification survey found that 85% of the land sits within levels 3B and 4, meaning it is low agricultural quality and therefore not classed as best most versatile. There is an excellent opportunity also to enhance biodiversity on site. Existing vegetation will help provide much initial screening assisted by proposed new planting. From the A1, there is good access route to the site which avoids nearby villages. There are good levels of sunlight in this part of the country, and this, along with enough relatively flat land and a viable grid connection, allows the solar farm to generate enough clean electricity to be commercially viable. We've also undertaken a number of environmental studies, which include archaeology, flood risk, traffic, noise, ecology, amongst others, to minimise the impacts. And Claire will talk about these more shortly in this presentation. So I'm going to pass over to Steph now, who is going to talk about what makes up a solar farm. Just seen a comment from Dave. Dave, thanks so much for letting us know that you're from Wesso Parish Council.
Thank you, Chloe. That's brilliant. Cool. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. So what makes up a solar farm? So as you can imagine, there are a number of different components that make up a solar farm. The photovoltaic panels are obviously one of the most important. And these PV panels are set out in rows with enough space between and underneath them for sheep to graze. Solar technology is advancing rapidly, and we will be using fixed tilt bifacial panels, which will allow higher efficiency in converting sunlight to solar energy. The panels have a lower edge of 0.8 meters and a maximum height of 3.5 meters. Each row will be approximately 2 meters apart, allowing plenty of space for grass to be grazed underneath them for the lifetime of the project. There will be a 2-meter tall security fence around the perimeter with space for small mammals to be able to pass through. And we'll be using wooden posts with green coloured fencing to stay in keeping with the agricultural feel of the site. Some new site tracks will be built, though we will endeavour to use existing tracks where possible. The new access tracks would have the appearance of typical vernacular farm tracks with a crushed stone surface, about 4 meters in width, and the tracks would be allowed to grass over in time. The inverters are located underneath the panels or in the center of most arrays and convert the power from DC to AC. The transformers are also used to step up the voltage, and this will be available to be distributed onto the grid network. There are storage units which are also included, which contain spare parts which might be required for the site. And there's also a substation where we step up the electricity to feed to the distribution network. The on-site compound will contain a number of electrical infrastructure components, an office and a storage building. It will also be surrounded by a security fence, and it is well screened as the land slopes slightly downwards in this area of the site. The temporary construction compound will be an area in the site for construction deliveries, site and welfare facilities. It's likely to be close to the entrance of the site, but the exact location will be confirmed at a later stage. There are also going to be a series of underground cables that connect the panels to the transformers and then onto the substation. And battery storage containers will also be included for on-site load shifting purposes for high times of generation. So the design. What you see here is an indicative site layout. The purpose of this consultation is to present our initial design and collate feedback from yourselves in the local community, which will then feed into the final design that we submit to Darlington Borough Council. As you can see, the panel arrays cover around half of the total site, but will only actually disturb a very small proportion of the ground, less than 0.05% in fact. This is because it's only the pile-driven posts which penetrate the ground, and the panels then sit on top of this structure. The grass can still grow under the panels on a UK solar farm, despite the misconception that the shade prevents it from doing so. And indeed, panels can also afford the grazing sheep some protection in bad weather and shade in sunny weather as well. The substation is located to the south of our site. Unfortunately, we are not able to connect into the overhead lines that cross the land. So instead, we'll be running a cable along the road to the distribution network substation, about 1.4 kilometers away. This is where we connect the electricity onto the grid to supply clean energy to your homes. We will be using monocrystalline silicon-based solar panels, which have up to 96% recycling efficiency. The operational period of this solar farm will be up to 40 years. Once the end of the operational period is reached, the solar farm will be decommissioned and the land will be returned back to its former state. In addition, the solar panels and associated infrastructure, in addition to the solar panels and the infrastructure, the proposal includes substantial ecological and landscape enhancements, such as new tree and hedgerow planting, hedgerow enrichment, and wildflower seeding throughout the site. We are retaining all existing hedgerows in and around the site with minimal removal for access. Thanks, Chloe. Tree belts and hedges will be planted on the western stretch to shield view from the motorists on the A1. You can probably see the cursor showing exactly what's going on there. And those hedges will also screen the nearby residencies on Burtree Lane as well. As I said, wildflowers will be sown to further boost biodiversity and attract the much needed pollinators to help tackle the ecological crisis too. There's a stream that runs through the site, and this will be retained completely. We're also allowing a 30-meter buffer to the south to protect water-based habitats. The footpath, which we touched upon earlier, is on the eastern boundary, and this will remain as is, with additional planting proposed to screen the view of the solar farm on one side. We have also allowed a setback from the railway bridge to keep an open view here. And from the outset, when we looked at this site, we purposefully ensured our site would have minimal impacts on this public right-of-way. For example, it doesn't cross through the site. We are adding trees where mature vegetation already exists, and you can still clearly see the railway and the fields to the east, allowing full enjoyment of the surroundings. We will also install information boards for users of the footpath to learn more about the solar farm, inform them of the local heritage and wildlife they might come across here, and see how this site is working to help combat climate change. There is no security lighting when the solar farm is operational. The only lighting that may be in place will be during construction. However, construction will mainly take place during daylight hours and during the summer, so lighting requirements will still be very minimal. It should also be noted that solar farms are very quiet, so we don't predict any adverse effects on residential receptors nearby. So we are going to move on to the viewpoints. So as you can see here from the map, we had about 6 viewpoints, all with those markers there to show. These next few slides will show what the site will look like from these viewpoints before and after the solar farm is built. The 6 views you will see here are based on viewpoints that have been agreed with the council, and this provides the widest representation for a range of receptors. Please note these are winter views, so any existing hedgerows and trees will not be in leaf. This is, of course, to show a worst case scenario, but in the summer months we will have the leaves on the trees. Okay, so the first photo montage. This viewpoint is taken from the southeast, about 280 meters away from at the lay-by on Burtree Lane. As the solar farm is already largely well screened, you might struggle to see it on your screen. The cursor here shows the location, and you can faintly make out the solar panels just beyond the trees. The existing hedgerow already provides good screening, and you can see that after 10 years, the new hedgerow has fully established and screened the solar farm from view. To note, all of these images will be uploaded to our website after this webinar, and will also be available to download once the application is live on the planning portal. So don't worry if you can't see exactly where the panels are right now. Great. So the second viewpoint, this is probably the most prominent viewpoint with regards to visibility, and is taken just over 800 meters to the north at the footpath near Wiley Hill Farm. You can faintly see the solar farm in the distance where the cursor is now. The hedgerows here have only recently been cut, so in the summer months they will provide more screening here. On to the next, thank you. So photo montage 3, this viewpoint is taken about 920 meters south of the site. The solar farm is located between the 2 pylons in the distance. Thank you, Chloe. Yeah. It has been modeled into this image, but again, as the existing topography already provides significant screening, it is almost impossible to see. The next viewpoint is taken nearly 1.5 kilometers northeast in Cotham, Munderville. Again, you can't see the solar farm due to the existing topography and vegetation, but we promise it is in there for you. And yeah, so it's kind of in the middle of the screen there. Yeah, thank you. And this viewpoint is taken over 3 kilometers away on the footpath near Trafalgar House, just northeast of our site. The red hatched area on the bottom image indicates the location of our proposed development, although again, as you can see, it's almost completely screened here. Great. And the final viewpoint, this is taken at the furthest location, just over 4 kilometers northeast on Lime Lane near Winfield House. Again, topography and existing vegetation screens it entirely, but the cursor on your screen now shows the location just beyond the tree line to the left of the red brick house. As you can see from these images, much of the solar farm will be very well hidden. However, we do recognize that there are some parts which will be visible from nearby properties. As such, we are already speaking with one resident and looking at ways in which we can further help mitigate their views. But if you are a nearby resident whose views might be affected, please do get in touch with us because we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph. So the construction of the solar farm will take place over a 4-month period. If consented this year, the build won't start until at least spring next year and probably nearer the summer, but the local community will be notified well in advance of this commencing. A construction environment management plan and construction traffic management plan will be agreed with Darlington Borough Council prior to construction commencing to protect residential amenity and the environment around the site. The route shown here is an indicative access route which comes off the A1M at the junction with the West Auckland Road and then uses the A Road network around Burtree Gate to reach the site entrance off Burtree Lane, where there is already a gated farm entrance which will be used for access to the solar farm. No modifications to the highway are needed. Aura Power will work with the Highways Authority to keep local traffic disruption to a minimum. Where possible, like with the site entrance, existing gaps in hedges and field access tracks are used to reach the areas of panels that are further within the solar farm site. The compacted gravel will be used where existing access tracks are not adequate for HGVs within the farmland. Most construction traffic will arrive on site in the first few weeks of construction, after which the number of HGVs will reduce. HGV movements will only happen outside of peak times, and a contact number will be made available for any residents who have any concerns over this period. As Steph has mentioned, the footpath beside the site will remain open for the duration of the construction period and operational period. Advance notification and signage will be in place, and if necessary, banksmen will be employed to ensure a safe environment for footpath users. As the solar farm requires little maintenance, after construction there will be minimal traffic going into the site. And next slide, please, Chloe.
Sorry, 1 second, just having a slight
That's
technical
all right,
issue.
I'll keep talking. I'm going to be moving on to biodiversity. A shocking recent report by Environmental Audit Committee found that the UK has the lowest level of biodiversity remaining of all the G7 countries and is one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. There is an abundance of evidence showing that the maintenance practices of solar farms can significantly improve local biodiversity, thereby addressing the UK's ecological crisis by providing habitats and food for wildlife. This is not only due to there being less intervention on the land compared with when the land was farmed with pesticides and fertilisers, but also due to the measures developers like Aura are putting in place to promote biodiversity. As the panels sit on piles, there is minimal disturbance to the ground, which allows the grass to continue to grow and the potential for sheep to graze beneath them. There's no reason to believe that this won't be the case here, obviously with sheep stock on the site already. Fields of low agricultural quality are converted to species-rich pasture with wildflower meadows acting as a stable store of carbon, a dual benefit to combat climate change and boost biodiversity. As the fields are left fallow for the life of the solar farm, the soil will be kept healthy, boost carbon sequestration, and after the solar farm has reached the end of its life, it can be removed, up to 96% recycled, as we mentioned earlier, and the land will be returned to its previous use. Panels and infrastructure will be positioned around existing hedges and trees. Vegetation removal will be minimal and only if needed to widen existing accesses. The fence will allow for small mammals to cross the site with small gaps underneath, and wildflower grass meadow will be planted under, between and around the solar panel rows to attract much needed pollinators. Approximately 2.3 kilometres of new hedgerows and trees will be planted, as well as enhancing many of the existing hedgerows. In addition, bird and bat boxes, including a barn owl box, will be placed across the site. With the existing stream running through the area, we feel there's a good potential to boost the biodiversity. This will allow for a significant net gain in biodiversity in excess of that recommended by Natural England and will greatly benefit local wildlife. A study by the Solar Trade Association discovered that some solar farms had up to 6 times more pollinators than adjacent fields without solar panels on. With this in mind, there is an opportunity here to install beehives, and if this is something you might be interested in helping us with, then we'd love to hear from you. Next slide, if you can, please, Chloe. The biodiversity measures that we've mentioned will be monitored and controlled through a landscape and ecological management plan, or LEMP. Sometimes this is known as a biodiversity management plan, and that will ensure that the biodiversity gains are maximised throughout the life of the solar farm. The LEMP will specify things such as where and how existing vegetation will be enhanced, the density of new meadow, hedges and trees, the species mix for the various habitats, although they will be native and locally suitable, how habitats will be protected during construction, and how habitats will be maintained through the project. The plan will be agreed with Darlington Borough Council and will outline the management regime of the solar farm to ensure the anticipated biodiversity net gain is achieved over the life of the project. Progression of the habitats will be monitored annually and reports will be submitted to the council. The LEMP will be regularly reviewed and adapted if necessary to ensure the biodiversity aims are met. Onto the survey findings that so far. Darlington Borough Council has issued a screening opinion which determined that we do not need to complete an environmental impact assessment. This does not preclude us from undertaking numerous environmental surveys and assessments which are underway by specialist consultants at the moment. Environmental surveys and assessments, as I say, are underway, but not all the results are available yet. I'll summarise what we have so far. So with ecology, there are no ecological designations on site, and those in the wider area have been considered in determining the appropriate scope of surveys. We've undertaken a number of ecological surveys over the past year, including for habitats, breeding birds and great crested newts, and further surveys are underway for otter, water vole and mink. Where wildlife is identified, suitable measures will be implemented for protection recommended by our ecologists, and the site design has already incorporated a wide buffer around the stream, as Steph mentioned, and the intention is this is to become a rich wetland habitat for a range of species. A comprehensive landscape assessment is underway by a landscape architect, and it's in consultation with the council to agree the methodology and appropriate scope. The LVIA will include assessment of impacts on landscape character and visual impact for residents, road and rail users and users of the public right of way. As you have seen with the visualisations and visibility modelling, this supplements the written assessment, which will be part of the planning application, and mitigations are proposed to reduce landscape impacts as far as possible. Onto heritage, we've started a comprehensive range of work here. A desk-based assessment with a site visit has been undertaken to consider the potential impacts of the development on designated and non-designated heritage assets. There are no designated assets within the site, and our studies show that there will be no impact on listed buildings, conservation areas or scheduled monuments in the wider area. We have also undertaken a geophysical survey, which along with the historical records has identified limited potential for archaeological interest within our site. The geophysical survey showed how this has been quite an industrial area for many years, with the former landfill in the southeast and the old quarry in the north of the site, which straddles the A1M. On the advice of the County Council's Heritage Officer, we will undertake trial trenching to ground truth the results of the desk-based assessment and geophysical survey. This is due to start next week, in fact, so you may well notice a little bit of activity on site. Next slide, please, Chloe. Thinking to amenity now, a noise assessment is underway based on the design we're presenting to you today. As part of this, a baseline noise monitoring exercise will take place, and then the proposed design will be modelled in that current environment. If necessary, mitigation measures will be included, and to minimise potential impacts, electrical infrastructure such as the inverters and transformers have already been located as far from residential dwellings as possible. Solar farms are very quiet. It is really only the inverters and transformers that make any noise. And obviously any noise that is generated will be limited to daytime when the solar panels are generating and therefore the electrical equipment is operating to export electricity. A glint and glare assessment will also be completed upon the finalised site design to consider potential impacts on residents, road and public right-of-way users and nearby aviation receptors. Landscape screening will mitigate the potential for glint and glare effects, which will only be possible to the west, through the south and to the east of the proposed site as the sun travels in reverse from the east through to the west during the day. The site is in flood zone 1, meaning it's very low probability of flooding from rivers and the sea. Through preliminary study of the site, we have identified areas of potential surface water flooding. No electrical infrastructure will be located in these areas and solar panels will be raised from the ground. A flood risk and surface water drainage strategy will be submitted with the application, and ecological mitigations are likely to help reduce the risk of surface water flooding. I'll now pass back to Chloe, who will go through local benefits.
Great, thanks, Claire. Okay, so as well as the enriched biodiversity that Claire mentioned, there are also a number of local benefits which this solar farm could bring. So number one, it will contribute over £80,000 in business rates to Darlington Borough Council every year. Jobs will be created during construction of the project, and within the supply chain there will be also ancillary benefits arising from contractors from outside the area coming in for construction, staying locally and using local services. We welcome any local suppliers who would like to be considered in our tendering process to get in touch. In addition to this, we are proposing a community benefit fund of £350 per megawatt. This is index linked per year for the lifetime of the solar farm. So this is to be spent locally on social and environmental projects. Typical projects that have been funded by other solar farm projects might include energy efficiency measures on public buildings, play equipment for children, and at one solar farm in a remote rural area, it funded a fibre optic broadband. So for the 49.9 megawatts that we are hoping to achieve at this site, this could amount to just over 17,000 a year, or for 40 years that would equate to 700,000 in total. So the administration of these funds would, be managed locally, typically by the parish council or an independent trust, and we welcome your suggestions for how this money could be used best in our survey that we'll be distributing. Or please do get in touch as well. We want to help infuse the younger generation and educate them on the importance of renewable energy. So to do this, we are setting aside £2,000 every year for local school visits, which is from the fund, for educational purposes. So we use an existing, very experienced company to deliver these sessions, which are all linked to the national curriculum. If you or you know a teacher from a local school who is interested in participating and being involved with this project, then we'd certainly love to hear from them. Okay, so consulting with the local community is a very important to us and a crucial part of getting our design right to submit a suitable planning application. So following this consultation, we'll then look to incorporate the views of the local community and interested parties into our proposal and revise our designs if necessary and feasible. We will then finalise our proposed design and aim to submit our planning application in the next couple of months. Darlington Borough Council has already provided application advice as well as issuing a screening opinion, and we will continue to work with the planning officer and specialist consultees once submitted to address any comments raised. So after the application is submitted, the council will undertake their own consultation process and invite local residents and the parish council to comment as well. So our aim is to submit a proposal which not only complies fully with the Darlington Borough Council's local plan and national planning policy framework, but also one which we hope the local community can support. The planning determination period for developments of this scale can take anything from 13 weeks to 32 weeks, but we hope to have a decision towards the end of the year. If approved, we would look to start construction at the earliest summer next year. Okay, so thank you ever so much for listening. We'll now answer any questions that you might have. If you haven't already done so, then please do type your question using the Q&A button at the bottom of this screen. I will then read out that question, and then one of our panelists is obviously on hand to answer that. So yeah, I can't see that we have any questions in there at the moment, so please do fire away if you do have any. If you don't, then great. I hope we've covered everything off. Oh, we have a message from Joe. Thanks, Joe. Cool. Okay, so are any other sites being considered? So I'll let Steph probably take this one, but Joe, just to give you a bit of background, I mean, we do a lot of site finding in the UK. Steph is one of our lead site finders. So, you know, there are numerous sites that we consider, but the most important part with this site and with all of our sites is finding that suitable grid connection, which we've secured at Darlington North, which, as Steph mentioned earlier, is 1.4 kilometres away. And that really founds the basis of the sites that we're able to look at nearby. Also, obviously, finding a willing landowner that's willing to work with us, and considering all of the other constraints that we need to consider, so the landscape designations, all of those bits and pieces. I don't know if Claire or Steph, you want to add any more to that answer?
Yeah, thank you very much, Joe, for your question there. I do a lot of work in the early stage pipeline of the UK development portfolio. And when we went to have a look at the land available for this site, we looked at all possible areas to call up landowners and see if they might be interested. There is a development that we're aware of to the south of Burtree Lane for a garden village, which obviously, you know, meant that area was not available for development, and we did also screen as much of the other land as possible. So this was the best parcel of land that we found. And in terms of other sites that are being considered, we are considering lots and lots of other sites in the UK as a whole. But this one is the land that we'll be using for our Darlington North connection.
Great, thanks, Steph. Joe, another question from you. How many school trips do you estimate in a year? So working with solar power education, I'll have to double check this, so I might have to come back to you after if that's okay, but I believe it's around 2 school trips a year, and that's with about 60 children in each group. So they also offer kind of in-school workshops as well, which obviously include subjects on solar farms, climate change, renewables, etc. So yeah, I hope that answers that one for you. So another one, diagram of the land with the stream doesn't show any trees. Okay, so we can have a little look at that in our site design. I mean, the design that we've showed on this is for illustrative purposes only. We'll be submitting a full, more technical drawing with our application, which will be publicly available to view when we submit. But we can certainly have a look on our design that we presented in this. But as far as I'm aware, it was created by our design team, so we'd hope it was correct. We'll have a look. So thanks. Okay, we've got a couple more questions that I can see coming up here. So the glint and glare assessment, how do you protect myself, my family and my horses? Okay, so Claire, do you want to take the question on the glint and glare? This is from the resident just on Burtree Lane.
Of course. So the assessment isn't completed yet, but it will consider all residences nearby, including yourself. If any impacts are identified, it will split out at what time of day and year those impacts are anticipated. What we'll do then is identify whether those impacts could be resolved with additional vegetation screening, or if sometimes a slight tilt of the panels is enough to take away those impacts in that particular location. So we'd look at the impacts that were identified through the modelling process at that point, and then look to rectify it. Obviously, we want to work with you as the closest resident to appease your concerns. So we don't want any significant impacts upon any residents around the site. So we'd look to resolve any glint and glare issues that could arise if the modelling does show that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this, just to reiterate that, it wouldn't be approved if there were any issues with glint and glare, particularly at sensitive nearby receptors. So we would have to mitigate them as part of planning guidance and also consideration for nearby residents. I think we'll pick up these conversations after with you, Joe, and we can speak about that separately and further. But I think that's all of the questions that we have for this evening, unless anybody else has any others. I'll just leave it open for a couple of moments. Okay, another question has come in from Michael. Thank you very much. So what will the substation cables to the site carry in voltage, and are you aware that cables over 60 kV under a European ruling 4 years ago is that any cables over 60 kV must be sited 25 meters away from houses due to EMF causing leukemia in young children? So where will the underground cables be sited? Okay, well, thanks for that question, Michael. I'm sure Steph might be able to fill you in on the exact location of those cables.
Yeah, thank you, Chloe. Thanks, Michael. So the cables will be underground, connecting the solar panels to the transformers, and then come down into the substation, which is on site. Our connection is via 33 kilovolts, so nothing will be over 33 kilovolts on site, and that 33 kV cable will go from site along the highway and down to our substation at Darlington North. So there'll be nothing of 60 kilovolts or anything of that size at all around the area.
Great, thank you very much, Steph. Okay, so thanks very much, everybody. Unless there's any more questions, I think we'll bring this evening to a close. Yeah, thanks all so much for your time. And we'd be grateful if you could complete our short survey, which will be sent around tomorrow. If you do have anything that you would like to discuss further, then please do get in touch. The contact details are on my screen here, but also they're available on our website. So please do feel free to contact me either by telephone or email. Yeah, and we can discuss anything further. Thanks again, and yeah, if you are watching the recorded version, you can find the feedback form on the website. Just to note that your personal details will not be passed on to any third parties and will only be used for the purpose of this public consultation. So thanks again, and have a lovely evening and good night.